Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Bret Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to bretridgway.com/freebie. Welcome to the Spotlight on Speaking show with Bret Ridgway, where you'll learn the keys to building a profitable speaking business from speaking industry pros. Each week, we interview a great guest who will share his or her speaking journey, identify what their keys to success have been, and highlight some critical mistakes they've made along the way that you'll want to avoid. Be sure to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, sit back, tune in, and get ready to meet this week's guest.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show with Bret Ridgway. And we're into part 4 of our special series on podcast guesting. And I want to welcome my co-host for this special series, Judy and Baker, to the show. Welcome again, Miss Judy.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm enjoying exploring this wonderful topic.
Well, it is such an important topic for speakers because podcasts should definitely be one of the things that they're doing to share their expertise and build their platform. Now, if you've listened to the first 3 series in this particular session, now if you
I've done it too.
pause, cut.
Yep.
Now, if you've joined us for the first 3 sessions of this special series, we were talking specifically about how to be most attractive to podcast hosts. We're going to change lanes this particular session, and we're going to talk about establishing the criteria for determining if a particular podcast is right for you. And I mean, there are literally thousands, if not even millions now, of podcasts out there. And you've got to decide, how are you going to determine if I should be on a particular show? And it isn't about necessarily the most listeners or watchers or anything like that, is it, Judy?
No, it really isn't. It's more important to be in front of the audience that is connected with your message and also the style of that podcast host.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you're much better off, as Judy says, you're better off talking to 10 people who are ideal prospects for you than talking to 1,000 people who have nothing to do with and no interest whatsoever in what you might be talking about. So it's about establishing criteria. And when you're looking at a show, certainly, even though you want to make sure the audience is appropriate for your topic, the bigger the audience, the better, without a doubt. So what are some of the ways, Judy, that people can determine what the listenership of a particular podcast is? Because, again, if you can get to a big one, great if it's a proper fit. So where do they look?
One of the things you can do is check the podcast directory. So, for instance, if you listen on Spotify, you can see how many people are paying attention to that particular show. You can also look on Google. I know. Who would have thought you could just Google and find out how many people are paying attention to that particular podcast? If you're in other directories like Apple Podcasts or, well, there's River FM, there are a gajillion directories as well. And you know what else? You can also check how active is that podcast host. And if you see a website for that podcast, I will guarantee you're going to find out what their reach looks like and how frequently, which is another piece of this, how frequently and consistently are they putting out new episodes?
So why is consistency important for you as a potential guest?
Just the same way that readers tend to gravitate to authors who have a series of books, when there's consistency, there is a demonstration of commitment, professionalism. And if you like a show and you know it's going to come out every week on Tuesday, people are waiting for that show to drop. They can subscribe. And if you are on a show, you want to encourage people to subscribe to that particular feed.
So, Judy, how important are reviews of a show in determining if it's an appropriate show for you to be on?
Well, I know for myself, I do read reviews of the show, and I also review the host. Sometimes I'll see a description for a show and it sounds perfect. It sounds like it'd be an ideal audience, an ideal format. And I go and listen, and it's not the same thing. When I look at a review, I can look at the range of reviews from good to poor to see what people are saying and their experience of being in the audience and also of being a guest. Many of the matching services also ask, when you've been a guest, would you please review the host? Not just the show, but review the host. And that information helps me determine, should I spend my time over here or not?
What do you mean by matching services, Judy, for those that may not be familiar
Ah,
with this whole thing?
there are some free services and there are some paid services where you become a member and you put in your profile. So you're giving the information about who you ideally want for your audience, who you are, the types of topics that you cover. And those services, like Podmatch in particular, is one of the most well known, will then make recommendations based on that information. Think of it like a dating service. Now, it's not just the paid services, there are a number of free services and groups where you can also put in your information and then look for an ideal match. But it is like a dating service. You want to know, is this a safe place I'm going to, be hanging out? Is this someone that I feel that I can trust? And am I going to shine if I'm in their arena?
All right, so you're going to be looking at the size of their audience, their consistency, their how they handle themselves in terms of, is it a good fit for you? What other things might you look at as a potential guest to determine if a show is appropriate for you?
I've gotten more discerning when I'm looking at, how does that host promote their show? Are they being consistent in getting the word out? Are they doing enough before the show? And depending on if we're doing a live uh, episode or if we're doing a recording, are they promoting it? If it's live, what's their breadth of social reach, and what channels is the show being broadcast on? If it's being recorded, are they not only giving me tools to promote the show, but how are they promoting the show? What are they doing to get the word out to their audience, which should make a big difference? And then, are they putting me in a good light? And I know you've got a whole system of how you take the episode, the the guest's picture and your branding, and you put that information out there so people can see it. And you actually do something even better with your newsletter, that you're featuring that podcast guest in your weekly newsletter. And I think that's marvelous.
Well, I think the smart podcast host certainly is going to make it as easy as possible for their guests to promote that episode because they want more listeners. And if you expect that the guest is going to create graphics or write a bunch of swipe copy to promote an episode of yours that they've been on, it probably is not going to happen. So you got to make it easy for them to promote. So when you're talking about promotion, certainly I think, Judy, one of the things that you need to look at is what are the host expectations of you in terms of promoting that episode. And some of them have very specific requirements. I mean, they might require you post via social, send it to your email list X number of times in
Mm-hmm.
exchange for being, on their show. Most of them are very reasonable and they're not going to be overtaxing to you in terms of promoting the episode. But as a guest, you certainly want to promote your episode because it's publicity for you. It's a chance for you to share your message with other people. And it's a chance for you to make that host look good. So when you're looking at expectations, what other things might come to mind for you, Judy, that maybe I haven't touched on in terms of expectations from the host of you?
Well, there's a couple of things. Do they want to do a pre-interview, which is something that I find particularly helpful? And on the shows where I've done, we've had a face-to-face, if you will, because most of them are virtual. There is a deepening of our relationship, and the rapport is already established. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have some unexpected questions thrown at me during the interview. That's perfectly okay. And I actually like that. However, I'm getting a sense of how that host paces their questions and also how much research they do in preparation for the show. Now, not all hosts do that, and it is time consuming, but I know that I've had a better experience when we've done that pre-interview. Other things, most often I'm asked for a headshot. I'm asked for what topic or topics I'm planning to cover. Am I going to offer something to the audience as a gift? And I usually will tailor something for a particular episode, or in the case of having a special report or something that I really feel is the first step for people to get to know me, I'm going to provide an easy to remember link. Some people are listening, some people are watching,
Right.
and that link will usually go in the show notes. So I want to be clear about that. And most of the hosts have asked me to email. They've asked me to, tell people the show's happening and do not and as you said, not this blitz, but to do enough promotion that I'm letting people be aware that I'm doing this. I'm letting them become aware of that host. And well, sometimes we talk about potential collaborations, but that's not a requirement. So I think I covered everything that I can remember right now.
Well, I think that you touched on it certainly, but one of the key questions you need to ask a potential host is, will you be able to mention what is called your lead magnet or freebie, whether that's a special report, an audio, PDF, whatever it may be. And some will, and some would prefer you don't, but most will. But you want to make sure what the ground rules are before you go in. I mean, they don't want you to be doing hard, heavy promotion, but they're generally okay with you mentioning something that you have to offer so that you can hopefully drive them from that show to your own website and get their name and email address to then follow up accordingly. So
Oh,
what about
Brett,
what
wait
about
a
yeah,
second. There is one thing that I think we might have touched on, but you need to remember as well if you're going to be a guest. Shows are evergreen. And if you mention something that is going to happen, but you don't know when someone's listening, that can make them feel a little uneasy. But if you direct them to your website where they can see, do you have an event coming up? Do you have some other things going on? That's a much better strategy. If you're trying to time your appearance with when you are announcing I'm doing a class, I'm doing a this, I've got a new something happening. You may or may not hit the mark. It's not horrible. It's not the worst thing in the world, but just be aware of it, because I know I've recorded shows and it was months before that show was live.
Yeah, that's certainly a question you want to ask the host is when will your episode go live so that you can fit that into your promotional schedule accordingly. And it is okay to promote something multiple times. I mean, you don't have to just do it one time. If you think you did an outstanding job and you want people to hear that episode again, then it's okay next month to put out a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post about you appeared on a show, because those things are so quickly out of sight, out of mind. Nobody's going to remember a month from now that you posted that exact same thing previously. So don't be afraid to put it out there again. So, Judy, you and I both had an experience before that I think we want to talk about, and that is it okay to pay a fee to be on a show? Because there are some shows that you got to pay to play. And, if it's the right audience for you, it may be okay to do that. And certainly, I don't think somebody should be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on a podcast. But you got to decide if it's right for you. I mean, the experience I'm talking about is Judy and I were both scheduled to be a guest on this particular gentleman's show. And if you wanted it to the episode to be released like right away, then you had to pay. It was, I don't remember, a couple $100 fee or
Yeah.
some amount or whatever. And in our particular case, neither of us needed the episode to release right now. So we said, no, we're fine with it, being recorded in 2 or 3 months or whatever it may be. And when that particular show date and time arrived, we were both entirely ghosted by that host because we were unwilling to pay a fee to be bumped up in his queue. So you got to decide. I think I paid once or twice to be on a show, not a lot,
Mhm.
but it was
Yeah.
never a large amount. But the key, obviously, is make sure it's the right audience that is on target with the message that you want to share, because paying to be on shows with the wrong people is just a waste of time and money. Any other thoughts on that, Judy B?
Well, I've paid a couple of times, and it was a small amount. I think one was 25 and one was $35. And what that host said is, this fee is because I'm going to be doing a social campaign, I'm going to be doing all of these things. And I know how much time it takes to generate all of that stuff. And so I didn't feel uncomfortable, but I did that probably more towards the beginning of my journey being a podcast guest. And unless really going to take, it's really going to elevate in some way, and I have demonstrable proof that being a guest on that particular show is going to explode my visibility, I would be very leery of that, because most hosts, if they are, this is a marketing tool for them, and they get to control the narrative, they get to control, where they're directing you. They're using that for their benefit, and you are participating, and it's a benefit to both of you. But there are so many, the majority of the shows, there's no cost to you as a guest. And I think really, really evaluate that. And you and I both know there are some people who put outrageous numbers out there to say, okay, if you're on my show, you're going to pay blah, blah, blah. Well, why? You have to say why. Why does that matter? And is it appropriate for me at this time? It may be down the road if you want to be on a particular stage, but I would say stay in your lane to get started and be comfortable, because if you feel like you're getting manipulated, that isn't going to be a good experience for anybody.
Without a doubt. So those are just some of the criteria we think are important for helping you determine if a show is right for you to be on. And remember that it doesn't have to be you doing all the searching for the shows. You can hire a VA or somebody else, train them on what your criteria are, and then, turn them loose appropriately. I actually once, Judy, I had a guy I was talking to about being on my show, and he told me literally that he was only appearing on shows that had a minimum of 100,000 downloads per month. That was his criteria. So I'm not sure he found a lot of shows that were getting that, but that was his particular criteria, which is fine. So,
Well, yeah, and you have to make your own rules in terms of, well, I'm going back to, the idea of that you're dating. If you have a list of your ideal podcast host, the ideal show, and you use that guide every time you're looking at a show, you're going to probably do a lot better. But I've also had the opportunity to fill in at the last minute because somebody didn't show up and it was someone I knew and they had a show and they said, "Can you jump on?" Well, in the world of improv, it's always yes and I'm there. So, you got to have a little bit of wiggle room in there, be a little bit adventurous at times and see what happens. And a good host, just as you're going to offer suggestions of other guests if they're interested, you can ask that host, are there other shows you think would be a good fit for me? Because Bret, I mean, you've been in the speaking world for 25 years. You all know a lot of people.
Yeah.
So ask. It's okay. They'll help you if they can. And I think that's a good way to find other like-minded audiences and hosts.
well, keep in mind these criteria that we're talking about can be tweaked over time. I mean, the gentleman I mentioned that has to have 100,000 listeners per month or whatever, none of us were there yet, but he obviously worked his way up to that. And you may find when you're just starting out, there are some podcasts you're going to be on just to get the experience and get more comfortable sharing your message and all that. They may not be ideal fits for you, and you may not do that show in 6 months or a year from now. But when you're first starting out, you need that practice. You need that experience. So it's okay to cut your teeth on some things maybe that wouldn't be an ideal fit for you as you get more polished. So, Judy M. Baker, thank you so much for joining me on this session number 4 of our special series on podcast guesting. We will continue in the next episode where we're going to talk specifically about how to best leverage your podcast appearances. So, as always, thank you for joining us. We wish you the greatest of success in all that you do, and may this year be your greatest year yet. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
This has been the Spotlight on Speaking show with Bret Ridgway. Be sure to join us every week as we interview speaking industry pros and have them share their best tips for building a profitable speaking business. Until next week, thank you for tuning in, and remember to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com so you can enjoy even more great episodes like this one. While you're here, be sure to subscribe via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Spotlight on Speaking show. Until then, our sincere best wishes to you for the greatest of success as you work to build your own profitable speaking business.